and welcome to the leak.
Thanks for having
me. Oh my God. Do you ever sleep?
Oh, nah, like that's time for that later when you're dead, right?
Oh my gosh. It's so wonderful to have you here. I noticed what's happened with your face? Are you okay?
My face, I rented out one of those electric scooters, which are really popular in Canberra and are great, convenient, great for the environment, amazing. Not so good if you're clumsy like me, and I fell off and ate dirt. So
oh no.
I know, but a very beautiful Canberran, like she stopped on the side of the road and picked me up and and she went finishing a shift at a restaurant. So when she dropped me home, she gave me all this wine and food to try to make me feel better. Yeah, it was a good time. It's Canberra. Everyone says Canberra sucks, and I'm here to tell you it doesn't.
Look, I agree. Canberra's the best. It was almost worth it breaking your face then for all that wine.
For a great yarn. Totally.
Yeah. Oh my God. It makes a great story. That's awesome. Exactly. Well, thank you again for making time for us. I just want to kick off our interview by asking you, has your career in stand-up comedy helped break the ice when you're interviewing all these politicians?
Yeah, look, I think it has. I reckon there's pollies that I don't tell. I think I can just probably tell that they're going to be a bit like, there are politicians who are like, oh, journalism or politics, this whole world should be your whole life. It's like a bit of a cult like that, right? Wow. But there are other politicians that I do tell, and it makes me this thing that doesn't exist so much in on the Hill, which is a human being. And I think they're surprised. They're like, oh, you're like a whole human with other hobbies and stuff. Like, that's amazing. So I think it endears me to them. And then, of course, I get asked for some jokes and stuff, which I'll always do, like the performing monkey that I am. And I think some of the jokes are like okay written. So they're kind of like, oh, she doesn't just like write and cover politics, but she's like semi-witty and funny. And I think, most of them, it's very endearing, and it is definitely an icebreaker.
That's great. That's wonderful. Well, I can attest that you are a fantastic comedian.
Says the great Maddie Weeks.
Oh, stop it. No, keep going. So it's such an interesting world. And do you think that when stories of alleged corruption crop up, what are some things you've observed in how these are addressed?
Okay, so very different federally and state. So the federal level, something that I've noticed, which is a bad thing, is that whenever there's the sense of corruption and sports rorts and stuff or whatever, the people who are most vocal about it are the opposition. It's their job to hold the government to account, right? Yeah. But a story, Labor says the government's corrupt and no good is kind of like, yeah, duh, kind of thing. Does that make sense? That makes sense. Yeah, so for a journalist, it actually lowers the newsworthiness of it, because Labor criticising the government is every day. So often with corruption stuff, you will have documents from departments. Often, as we've seen with sports rorts, with car park rorts and so on, the Auditor General gets involved, and that's when the media is like, here's what the Auditor General finds. But I think what it's shown me particularly is this is why we need an independent federal anti-corruption body, because otherwise the loudest voices on government corruption is Labor. And the fact is that journalists and often the public don't care too much if Labor's the one criticising the government, because they're like, that's what they do every day, which is frustrating, because sometimes Labor has a good yarn and a good point, and my guys are just like, oh, but it's just Labor criticising the government. We have that all the time,
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but it is true. Obviously, Labor hates the government.
Yeah, it's
that's not surprised.
That's not news, soz.
Sorry, yeah, we can all figure that out pretty easily.
Yeah.
Do you think have there been have there been any ripples from the current New South Wales and Victorian corruption scandals? Are they affecting federal politics? Have the state scandals impacted federal politics differently?
Yeah, well, a few things have happened. First of all, it's reignited the debate for a federal anti-corruption body. That's something that was brought up in 2018, and with COVID and everything, and with so many things, it's just been silenced, right? Or not silenced, but we just don't have the headspace. And then with these state things, it brings it up again. Hey, where is that national body? So it's reignited the debate. Also, it has practical implications. So Anthony Byrne, who's a Victorian MP, a federal MP, is embroiled in all the Victorian anti-corruption stuff. And he hasn't resigned from Parliament, but he's had to step down from this really powerful Senate committee called the Parliamentary Joint Committee into Intelligence and Security, the PJIS. And it's a really big deal, very prestigious. So the other day he was like, I've handed in my resignation from that to Anthony Albanese, blah, blah, blah. And I think when politicians start handing in resignations, it starts to smack of like admitting wrong. So, yeah, there seems like there's definitely going to be implications in terms of federal politicians implicated in branch stacking and other stuff. And then if they have to quit, for instance, that's going to have an impact on like the numbers in the House and the Senate. And that's a big deal because when it comes to bills and laws, having X amount of numbers, whether you're the government or Labor, whatever, is like the most important thing. So, yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Wow, it's exciting. Oh my goodness. It's nice to have something on the news other than COVID, but I guess it would be better not to have corrupt politicians.
It'd be lovely, wouldn't it? It would be so great.
The perfect world. Could you like break down the differences? So I know that there's the government's proposed Federal Integrity Commission, and then there's this alternative model proposed by independent MP Helen Haynes.
Yeah.
Like, is it a Rainforest Alliance versus fair trade situation? Like, what's going on?
So I think the main thing, so the government proposed this in 2018. We've kind of heard about it. They've laid it out, but we haven't seen like the full document, like everything in detail and so on. The main thing that is an element of this bill, it has to obviously pass legislation, that's gotten a lot of attention, is that it doesn't hold public hearings. So as you would have probably noticed, even if you're just flicking around on news channels, the New South Wales anti-corruption and Victorian anti-corruption stuff, you can see that on TV all the time. The hearings are public. That wouldn't happen with the Federal Commission, which is a big deal.
Oh.
Yeah, and it would be very limited as to who it could call, which again, I think it's like it would be like parliamentarians and certain public servants. And again, like it's important that we can call a range of witnesses, not to say that they're guilty, but they might know something, right? So it's like the criticism has been that it's limited in its scope, and that it would have no teeth, because the accountability, and particularly the public accountability, would be null and void because there's no public hearings. In comparison, as you can probably guess by now what I'm going to say, the alternative model does have public hearings, and it's way broader in who you can call and so on. So the government's saying that the reason they don't have these public hearings, yada, 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 is that they've been really critical, the government side of the Sydney, the New South Wales corruption stuff. They're like, it assumes guilt before, a fair trial, and it's taken a great leader, Gladys Berejiklian, down. She hasn't even done anything wrong yet. We don't know that, and that's why their bill looks this way. The important thing to know about that, though, is that the Corruption Commission didn't tell Gladys to step down. Like, it didn't force her to do that. No commission would until it had findings. Same as many times Liberal premiers have stepped down. It's not the Federal Corruption Commission going, hey, or a corruption commission, a state corruption commission going, hey, get out. It's the premiers or whoever being like, oh, this is going to get messy, I should step down. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of like where we're at with it all.
Wow. Okay. It's so interesting that this is like an insight into this world. So cool. From your vantage point, how likely do you think that either of these proposed models will actually be legislated?
Okay, so it's hard to say. So on this week, Helen Haynes and Rex Patrick, who are crossbenchers, tried to bring on their bill, right? Mm-hmm. Now, you have to do that in the House, and the House, the government has the majority, okay? So if all of the government are like, yeah, stuff this, we're voting this down, that's it, right? The interesting thing is some government backbenchers, Liberals, have raised concern with the proposed, anti-corruption commission at the federal level. They haven't voted in favour of a crossbench version. So I think it's hard, isn't it? So I don't know if the government's exact proposed bill is going to pass because it's actually got concerns within its own party. However, that same party is quite proud. They probably don't want to give all the credit of a corruption commission eventually to some rando crossbenchers. They'd rather work with their government to reform it in a way that's going to be good and then have it pass, because otherwise I think it just makes them look bad and makes their party look bad, right? So for anything to pass except what the government brings on to Parliament, I think is quite unlikely. For the government's bill in its current form to pass without any, amendments, particularly from its own party, I think is also a bit unlikely, because there is growing momentum behind there needing to be stronger, stuff in this anti-corruption commission. So, yeah, it's an interesting spot we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Really a formative time. Absolutely. It must be pretty exciting. Are you back in Parliament, like in person?
Yeah,
wow.
As of this week. So we've had weeks and weeks off parliamentary sitting, which collided with the lockdown, so we were just working from home. So we're back in Parliament House. Heaps of politicians are back in Parliament House. Pretty interesting. There's a lot of temperature checks. You walk in, you get your temperature checked and stuff, and have to wear masks everywhere, obviously. And it's still pretty quiet because a lot of politicians, or all of them, have not brought over their staff or have really minimal staff. So it still feels a little bit like a dead zone, but it's still exciting to be in the building, sitting in the Senate or the House of Reps and looking at the politicians' debate stuff and everything and having a bit of a laugh.
That sounds so nice. What is a typical day in the Canberra Press Gallery? Is there a typical day? What's your vibe?
So it's very different. The job, there's almost two different jobs. There's the job on a sitting week and there's the job off a sitting week. So let's go sitting week, because that's when politicians and the PMs here. So stuff really heats up really early in the morning at 6:37, because people are on their on TVs and radio, ministers and stuff, and we call it doing the rounds. They'll hop to all the I'm going to do Sky and then ABC and then Nine and stuff. And then also what happens is everyone is arriving into Parliament, and a lot of journalists, mostly TV, but I've done it as well because sometimes you have a question, is we do a thing called doors, go do doors. And that is where you stand out the front of either the Senate entrance or the House of Representatives and you ask questions of people as they come in. You door stop them. If you have a mic or if you have just a phone like I do, you're how are you going to vote today on this bill? Or are the Nats any closer to blah? And sometimes people won't chat. Sometimes they will. Sometimes a politician well enough to be hey, Matt, come talk to me, and he'll come over and you can and that's called doors, and that you really have to be there between sort of 7 and 8:30. And then, depending on the day, Parliament will begin. That can be 9, 10, 11 or 12, and the Senate and the House meet. You can, as a journalist, you can go into the press gallery of both of these chambers and watch what's going on, or you can live stream it if you're in the office trying to do 1,000 things like I often do. And then, there's party briefings where both parties meet and discuss stuff, and then they brief us journalists afterwards. There's question time where we go in and watch parliamentarians tear each other apart. And then, then there's the thing that my bureau is pretty big on, a lot of bureaus big on, is that after stuff dies down at sort of 7:30, 8 p.m, you go out for dinner with an MP or a senator or numerous, because they're in town, and you chat about stuff. You chat about what they're doing. They'll chat about, hey, I've got this great story and stuff. So there's a lot of socializing. It's a very social thing, which is good, but can also, as we've seen with some of parliamentary culture discussion recently, can also be bad, because there's alcohol involved and stuff. It's where are certain lines? Are you still on the clock if you've had a heap of booze? So it's great. It's social. It's interesting. You chat to all these people, but the lines between your life and your personal life and your professional life are pretty blurred, to be honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's the etiquette like? Do you find that you're able to ask questions about corruption? Is it hard to get a straight answer out of these politicians when it comes to matters of corruption?
Yeah, I mean, etiquette, you can ask anything of a politician, really. It's on you. There's been times when I've asked Bill Shorten and Anthony Albanese, who've been standing next to each other, and I've been oh, Albo, are you comfortable in your job, or are you worried about a leadership challenge from Bill, do you want his job? There's there's no you can do whatever you want, right? There's no rules.
Amazing.
Certain questions maybe people will see it as a great question, maybe see it as a bad pet question. Will be your reputation's on the line, but do whatever you want. Corruption, we ask about it all the time. But the government knows this. And they have been, it's, their job and the job of their staff to really have really set answers. And government ministers have their lines down packed. Do you know what I mean? They're just like, it's almost like they have a list of 10 answers, and depending on the question, whatever answers it the best, like engages with that question, that's what they'll say. But it's interesting as a journalist, because you actually do hear exactly the same words from different people. You'll hear like, we investigated this within our own offices, and as you'll know, the Auditor General found that wild blah actually X and stuff. Like, it's the same line, which is annoying, and it can get disheartening to keep asking questions. For a TV journo, it's actually great, because if the ministers don't answer questions, or if they walk away, the TV journalists will follow them and be like, why aren't you answering these questions? And it's great vision, and they'll run that. Like, whereas me as a print journal, I can't be like, and then he walked away from me, and that proves that blah. Like, I actually need good answers, which doesn't happen a lot,
Oh my God, this is so interesting. Oh, you're the best. You've just got so much knowledge, and I really want to thank you again for sharing it with us.
Yeah, of course.
Just to pivot a bit, I want to know more about Politics Made OK. Like, how did that all come about?
Well, interestingly, it came about because of, you might have heard of, how Google had all these deals with news companies because like they weren't paying for news content.
Yeah.
And it seemed like this really big deal. It seemed like Google was really, stuffing up this everything, and like, had so much power, and it really sucked. There. Fast forward though, Google has paid multiple companies like mine a fair bit of money, and interestingly, there's a lot of expansion and like interesting projects going on. So Google actually gave my company a bit more money, as they did a lot of other companies, and we decided to do some more like multimedia stuff. So my company, the West Oz, are like, we're going to do YouTube. There's a few different journos who are doing YouTube as well. Rani Hanarini is also a great West Oz journo who's doing Paint It Black, which is an Indigenous she's an Indigenous reporter who does like explainers about like, what's going on in that space, which is great. And so, yeah, I got approached by my editor of the paper, and he was like, look, you do comedy, right? Hey, there
you go.
And he was like, what do you reckon? Like, you could be like this young person on the hill who like breaks like politics down and, like makes it fun. And I said, like, absolutely, it'll be great. But I think the difference for me compared to all other journos is I'm alone. Like, journos in Perth and journos in Sydney under my company have film crews, and they have producers, and they have people who help them script and film, whereas I like script it all myself, and then like set up the ring light and the camera, and then like try to do it. I don't have to edit it, thank God. But yeah, so it all came together through that kind of deal, and then I was just given free reign, for better or worse. And I'm really enjoying it.
It's great. I've watched a couple episodes and it's really good. It kind of feels to me like is it like a laugh so you won't cry kind of thing?
Totally. Like, I think even in the first like pilot, I was like, I'm just going to try to make this okay. Like, I'm just going to try to make this bearable, And the fact is, like, with COVID, we have been glued to the news in a good and a bad way. Like, people are tuning into their pollies in ways that they never have before. There's positives to that. They're also so drained with info and with politics and with the news, and it's really, there's a fatigue there. Yeah. So I think it's trying to be like, cool, there's still a way for you to be up to date without feeling drained, without feeling sad at the end or like tired, like let's have some fun with it sort of thing. And yeah, very much laugh so you don't cry.
I love that. We need more of that, I think.
Yeah,
because it is also very depressing. Oh my God.
Depressing. Like, literally, there are some weeks that I'm just like, the state of the world.
It hurts.
It hurts so much.
Have any politicians or other press gallery members seen Politics Made OK? Have they given you any feedback about it?
Yeah. A lot of people really like it. Politicians have messaged me.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and an MP. This is the weird thing you might not know about journos is like we all have politicians like direct numbers. Like, wow. So like the treasurer called me the other day being like, hey, how you going? Have you got that speech? I'm like, hey, Josh, yes, I do. Like, you know, so that's the whole thing. So politicians message me directly and they're like, hey, so the message they gave me this week was really lovely. They were like, hey, how do you keep injuring yourself? Like, what is going on? So I got all these direct messages from MPs, senators being like, what are you doing? They seem to be really enjoying it. It's hard. They're human beings as well who are also trying to consume a lot of media. So with everything, cut through is tough, but I'm getting a lot of good responses so far. And I think it's just that thing of just being consistent, pumping an episode out each week, sticking to the roots, making sure it's just like, you know, fun and seeing who it attracts, I guess, you know.
Absolutely. This is great. Like, you're so good at it. Did you always like have an interest in politics, or did it develop as you like progressed in your journalism career?
Yeah, I'm one of the unicorns that wasn't like a fed poll, like it's my life before my career. Like my family didn't debate politics at the dinner table like a lot of journos and politicians. That's just how they grew up. And my mum's Swiss. She's from Switzerland. So, like, actually, the Australian political system is pretty foreign to her. So, yeah, it just wasn't that big of a part of my life. And then I got into journalism and did, like, a lot of regional journalism. I worked in Dunsborough for a long time in WA, and then in Perth. And then I kind of was starting to get interested in politics, like state in WA, because, like, federal is, like, you know, you need to work your way up. But then my editor, who is amazing and like always has given me a real shot, he was just like, look, I could move you into state politics, but you're going to get bored real quick. I know you. So let's just throw you right into Fed poll. Good luck. And it was a steep as learning curve. Like the first few months, I was just like, oh. But now through this job, like I love it. I love discussing it. Like I don't know, it's just like I really love my life. Like, yeah, so it's definitely developed as I've gone.
I love it. And you get to be in Canberra, the greatest city in the world.
The greatest city in the world, guys. Come on. People will pick you up and give you wine. Like, that doesn't happen anywhere else, you know?
So lovely. Oh, my God. And I know you're in comedy. That's how we met, through the Canberra comedy scene. And I'm a bit out of the loop now. Are there any other like journalists in the Canberra stand-up scene? Is there like a secret Federal Bureau open mic night where everyone in the gallery just roasts the MP?
No, there used to be one other journal I knew who did it, who's now not in Canberra. And then there's people sort of who are like have sort of public sector-y jobs, so we have a bit of crossover. But I think I'm the only journo doing it, which is daunting. But yeah, it's been okay. Like, people have come to the gigs before and I'm like, oh no.
Have any politicians come to see your shows?
Not yet, because a lot of politicians are in Canberra during sitting weeks, obviously, and I try to not do comedy on the 15-hour days of sitting weeks.
Well, fair enough. Yeah,
fair enough. So there's not so much of that, but like staffers have. It was a really funny moment in my show Growing Pains with I think it was Growing Pains. Yeah. Anyway, with Chelsea Heaney, which was a great show where someone I know from the Prime Minister's office came. So not the PM.
Whoa.
Not the PM, but someone from the PMO. I did some jokes about the PM. And I couldn't help, because I think I was just so nervous. I couldn't help just staring at him as I was delivering the jokes. And I was just like, shit.
Oh my God.
Oh no. And then came up after the show and I was like, look, mate, please don't. Like, and he was just like, that was so good.
Yes.
So yeah, like, you know, staffers mostly and stuff like that of both sides of politics have seen all my stuff and I'm mostly okay with it. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, we've done it. We've done the interview. Thank you so much for your time.
Excellent.
Absolutely delightful. Sarah, everybody, so bloody great.
Thank you so much for having me on.